question will begin with Senator Tester of Montana.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the courtesy, and thank you all for your testimony. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Knopfsinger. AARP fraud hotline, by your own testimony, you've been overseeing it for 23 years. Is that correct? I'll get to the question here. This is what's the real important part. Over the time that you've been monitoring the fraud hotline, Ms. Harris talked about doubling in the last year. What have you seen on that fraud, on the AARP fraud hotline, as far as the amount of threats?
Thank you so much for that question. We've absolutely seen a significant increase in threats, but I also want to say we've seen an increase in reporting, and I think that's really important because when I started 23 years ago, we weren't getting reports. People were still being victimized, but they were doing it alone, and they were not reporting it to law enforcement, to us, to any of my partners here at the table. And that, to me, is what's encouraging, that people are reporting it, because we need to know what's happening so we can take action to fight it.
One of the things that's happened, and I serve, and so does the chairman of this committee, serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee, is I get contacts from actually, it's usually from family members of a member who has been scammed. And when we've reported it to law enforcement has come in and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they've been scammed. How often does that kind of situation happen?
I think it's happening a little bit less than we think it is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, from what I know from talking with victims when they do report it to law enforcement,
right.
We also help coach our victims when they do report it to law enforcement. We say when you go in there, say you were a victim of a financial crime, get your report, but just have the expectation that it might not be all wrapped up in 24 hours like on a television show, right? Like these are investigations that need to happen. But the most important thing is that people do report it to law enforcement and that we work with our law enforcement partners to help them accept those reports.
So I'm here to tell you that every day I either get an email or a phone call from somebody who's trying to screw me out of my money. So, and a lot of these folks aren't in the U.S. Some of them are from Russia, China, Eastern Bloc. How can the consumer stay ahead of this? And by the way, the same thing with the financial folks, the banks, the credit unions, all those folks. How can they stay ahead of it too? Because it's never ending. I mean, it drives my wife crazy when I actually answer those fake phone numbers and they call up, and I graduated from college 46 years ago. It was a time when my parents could pay for my college, so I have no debt. And they proceed to tell me how much debt I have for going to college. And I'm positive it ain't about because they're nice people. It's because they're trying to take money and not work for it. So tell me how consumers and financial institutions can stay ahead, and that's open to all three of you. Go ahead, Ms. Knopfsinger.
Thank you for that question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, that is one thing that has drastically changed the game of fraud, if you want to call it that, in my 23 years doing this, is the device that we carry in our pockets. These criminals are accessible to us 24/7, and we do need to take control back of these devices that we call phones, but are essentially mini computers that we carry in our pocket. And we need to understand that wherever we are online, the criminals are online waiting for us. There is built-in technology in a lot of these devices to block unknown calls, but people are not adapting it, and we got to get the word.
Show me how to do that.
I will talk to you afterwards. But that's exactly what we need to do, is we need to take control back.
So what about the calls that I get from my neighbors that aren't my neighbors? Is there ways to block those too?
Absolutely. If they're not in your contacts list, you can set it up to have any unknown number that's not in your contacts go directly to voicemail. But it's, again, this is where we need to do some protection barriers in our own lives to protect ourselves. And I'm sure my co-witnesses have some comments as well.
Sure, thank you. So that's, for us, is where the education comes into play. And what we have tried to do in our educational efforts is to get to the brass tacks of what folks are doing and to give people the basics. Because if we give details for things, if we say a scammer may call you and ask for Google Play gift cards, if a scammer calls and asks for a wire transfer instead, they go, oh, that's not a scam. And so we try to be a little bit more broader with that. You know, if it's somebody pretending that they try to pretend to be someone you know or recognize. So if you're getting a cold call from somebody that you're not expecting, you can hang up and call in a number that you know belongs to them. Or they always say there's a prize or a problem involved. They put in that pressure and they ask for those forms of payment that are not easily traceable. So, and we also tell folks not to answer the phone if you don't know the number, that it'll go to voicemail. If it's important, then you can call them back. But I know with our elderly population and the state of the loneliness that we have, it's hard for folks to do.
I'd just like to fight with them and tell them to get a real job, but go ahead, Ms. Harris.
I agree with everyone at this table. However, I'm going to say this. You know how many calls you get. It is incessant and it never ends.
That's right.
We have people, and like, okay, is it really practical for you as a lawmaker who responds to all sorts of constituents to say, only people I know are getting through my phone? Yeah. There has to be more effort put into identifying scam calls. And Shake and Stirred is fabulous. It is. And that's that little thing that comes up on your phone sometimes where it actually tells you, oh, hey, this is a spam risk, right? So that's helpful. But so many of these calls come through to people who, they're not identified as that. They're unidentified. And scammers have adapted already. Scammers are very quick to adapt to any law or rule that we have, but that's why laws have to be really big and really flexible. But I just think that to ask, I mean, we tell people to don't answer calls you don't know, but we get calls from people who are, I'm a nurse on call, I have to answer my phone. And it is disrupting people's lives still.
Yeah. I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate what all of you are doing, and keep educating. Thank you.